So we will do one quick exercise on that, again through an interaction with the class. Okay? So I will move on to the next one. And let's say we do a bar chart this time. Maybe there's about 100 of you here. Let's start that thing. Rate how immersive these interactivities are. So I have just picked a few interactivities out of the list that we had earlier. And we're going to rate them now, rank them, as it were, on a range going from 0 to 100. Where do questions stand vis-a-vis drag drops, mini games, and so on? So let's start with questions. Compared to the other 4 types of interactivities, would you say that the questions are potentially the least interactive? Arguably, at least in terms of immersion, because you answer the question, you're done. So let's put them here. How about drag drop exercises? Slightly better because there is a visual element to it. And mini games, even better because there is a challenge, there is a context, there is a response, and there is a feedback. So a mini game has much more going for it than a drag drop exercise, right? And how about simulations? Even more, because now you're really talking about delayed feedback. A simulation doesn't necessarily punish you for something you do wrong immediately, but it sort of builds the suspense and lets you discover what happens after you have made a mistake and gives you a delayed feedback. So you have, on one hand, a risk-free environment. On the other hand, you also have a bit of a suspense built there. So you're not quite sure how you're going. With a question, the feedback is immediate. With a simulation, you can have a delayed feedback. And finally, the virtual worlds. Now here you're talking about a truly three-dimensional simulated environment where you're actually going through the experience of communicating with an avatar or turning around, exploring places, and so on. So it's a fully immersive environment. What I'm trying to say here is, if you notice the degree of immersion in these various types of interactivity, it varies by the kind of interactivity you choose. Okay? And we just did this interactively using an interactivity, as you saw. Okay. So let's move on and get to some kind of a definition which helps us know what is interactivity and what is not. I think the key difference between an interactive element and a non-interactive element is that the interaction is non-trivial. Okay? It's an active, two-way dialogue which engages learners and produces better outcomes. That is what you're looking at with interactivity. And examples are games, simulations, virtual worlds, exercises. All those are good examples of interactivity. So when you say your e-learning is interactive, you're talking about some of those elements and not simply multiple choice questions, quizzes, and so on. So button-clicking interfaces are just interfaces, they are not interactivity. The goal of an interface is to make it easy to get into a program. The goal of interactivity is to make it hard to get out of it. Okay? With interactivity, you are capturing attention, ensuring engagement and stickiness. What is not interactivity is an interaction that is trivial, and navigation or question answers are not examples of interactivity by today's standards. If you go back 20 years and if you look at CBTs, one of the big things CBTs had going for them was, oh, there are questions and you could get graded automatically and immediately. But not anymore, because you're talking 20 years later, our learners expect a totally different level of immersion. And that's what we need to provide them. So if the difference is clear, I can move on why should learning professionals care about interactivity? Well, the first reason, and the obvious one, is we are talking about a whole new generation of learners, and they expect more interaction. Right? I mean, there's a whole generation that cannot get off the iPhone, and they are used to a touch screen, they are used to the accelerometer, they are used to playing video games, and you need to bring some of the interesting elements of those to their learning in order to get their attention. So the learners are driving the need for interactivity, first and foremost. But then that's not all. There are many other things. And this is an important point. When technology replaces humans, the first thing that happens is it actually hinders interaction. Think about PowerPoint. How many PowerPoint presentations are truly exciting and interesting compared to a flip chart? Even a flip chart has a lot of activity in it because the teacher or the trainer or the presenter is walking out, doing something, asking you a question, working together with you. With PowerPoint, you're simply passively watching what's unfolding on the screen, right? So if you use technology as it is, most likely it will hinder interaction. And this is particularly true with e-learning because you're taking the instructor out of the picture, right? And when that happens, with the instructor not there, it's easy for the learner to get distracted. So you have basically removed one kind of interaction and you haven't substituted it with another kind of interaction you once did. When the teacher or the trainer is not there, you took something away. You need to substitute it using technology. And that's what interactivity does. And that's why we need it. Over time, therefore, new ways of interacting replace the old ones. And this is a fascinating thing to watch. For the lack of time, I cannot give you too many examples. Just reflect on the way we converse on telephone today, or the way we use the phone as a communication device. It's slowly beginning to replace some of the things that we actually did face-to-face in very interesting ways, if you consider all the different ways we use the phone. And then, equally importantly, course creators need to recognize and embrace this change. And the technology tools that are available are actually lowering the barrier to interactivity creation. There was a time when a course creator that was asked to build a simulation or a virtual world or a game would almost have to start flexing his or her programming muscles. Not anymore. There are tools available that let you do that. Okay, so it's good news. Just now someone talked about communities or wikis. Now there's ready-made software out there. So the barrier to entry is lowering, and that's good news. Okay. So what are some of these emerging trends we're looking at? One, presentations need to come alive with interactive elements. And I just showed you a little demonstration of that in the beginning of my presentation. You cannot just have bullet points. You need to have more things in your presentations. Examples of technologies that let you do that are Yawnbuster, Flash, and Silverlight. We do have a Yawnbuster demo in our booth, the Raptivity by Harbinger Group. Virtual worlds, 3D environments, games, and so on, they create immersive experiences. Second Life, Teleplays, Proton Media, these are all tools that let you do that. Rapid interactivity building tools lower the barrier to interactivity building. Interactivity is a great example of that. Over 214 ready-made interactivity templates are part of Raptivity, and you don't have to write a single line of code to create a jigsaw puzzle or a crossword or a three-dimensional tour or a virtual world experience. It's templatized. It may be limiting because it is templatized, but then it's very easy. So you need to see the trade-off.